the tech industry, as well as the energy industry, remains predominantly white male.
Yes.
The latest statistic from SIA and the Solar Foundation is 24% female in the energy industry, the clean energy industry. Can you provide some examples from the companies you've worked with in which you've seen that diversity has actually proved a strategic advantage?
Yeah, I typically am not drawn to companies that lack an understanding about why this is really vital and critical to their business. But I have had occasion where companies have not pursued it with intention and focus and drive. And they typically tend to have a more difficult time sort of getting themselves out of tricky situations. And these can just be day-to-day situations of like, hey, we've got some resistance in this particular area. How do we get through it? And yet my companies that do have folks that are from all different types of walks of life and backgrounds, whether that's class or education or age, typically can solve almost anything that comes up in a way that's creative and serves the company, and often have a greater sense of what's efficient and productive. That's something that you often don't see in homogeneous groups of folks, where there's just not that sort of outside opinion or idea or creativity. And so I can't think of any specific examples because there's so many where it's a positive value add. I think it can be as simple as kind of just missing things unintentionally, right? Like a lot of this is unintentional, but if you don't have friends that are African American, which I forget the statistic, most white folks don't have close friends that are African Americans, as an example, then you may not know how to speak to that customer. And so putting dollars to that experience, like that might be a vital piece of what your work needs to contain. So how do you access that? So if it's not a team member, do you have the resources to reach out outside of your network to find those folks?
I think it's interesting what you said about the dollars to access that, because a lot of people look at D&I as a cost to a business, HR as a cost to a business, marketing to attract these people as a cost to a business. But there's so much data out there that talks about how it's not just a feel-good issue. It's really increases the bottom line, and companies are just more profitable when they're more diverse. It's really that simple. Yeah,
it is that simple. And we need to remember that white people actually don't want to work in all white companies either. So it's not just that you're being gracious and allowing people to come in and work with you, but it's also that you're providing a workplace that everyone can benefit from. And so if you have someone on your team that has skill sets that you don't have, you are thereby learning from them as well, and just adding to your own personal value and brand. So I think we forget about that, and we sort of think of it from the entry point, but we want to create something that's interesting and vibrant for everyone and retains them once they come in. So that includes everybody.
What is your biggest piece of advice for organizations looking to get started with D&I?
That's an excellent question. There are so many amazing providers doing this work right now. I would say, obviously, D&I starts at recruiting. So really looking at your recruiting team and assessing whether they have inclusion and diversity hiring skill sets. So if your recruiter is also just reaching out to a certain subset of folks, you're going to get a certain pool to hire and interview from. So you may have to find recruiters who specialize in this type of work, or you need to kind of really push your recruiters to bring you the results that you hope to see. And sometimes that means developing frameworks around, listen, if we're interviewing 5 candidates, one of those has to be someone who has a different gender and has a different ethnicity or a different lifestyle or a different disability or different age. There's so many things, right? So again, you can't sit there and sort of hope that folks are going to be attracted. Your website has to reflect it. Your marketing has to reflect it. And there is a dollar cost to that. So, again, I think either you're going to, as a CEO and founder, you're going to pursue this and do it actively ahead of this trend, or you're going to, I'm sorry, you're going to wait until you really don't have a choice. And I would just much rather be on the leading edge of anything that's coming up. And I think doing it now is still the leading edge. Like, people shouldn't feel embarrassed that they haven't been able to achieve these goals before.
And speaking of leading edge, I just want to give a quick shout out to Adam James, the Chief of Staff at Energy Impact Partners, who introduced us, because he is the prime example of how somebody that is in the energy industry, and he is only from the energy industry, his whole background, recognizes the importance of bringing people in from different industries, and went and sought you out to help him with the D&I initiative within EIP.
Yeah, so Adam is an example of a visionary and someone who's really passionate about this work and dedicated to it through action. And so if you think of me as an example of that, we were not in each other's networks at all. And he reached out to me and supported me and has made sure that my entry into this space has been as graceful as I would allow it to be. But he's an incredible ally. Yeah,
no, he really is. Okay, I just want to talk a couple more questions about something that's come up recently in my recruiting that I want to get your thoughts on, and I want people to know about, and that's the salary history ban. The salary history ban in California and New York. I'm sure it's also Massachusetts. Massachusetts is always right there with us. So tell us a little bit about the salary history ban and why it's important.
So California and New York are the states that are very protective of employees overall. And so companies that are based in those states really need to be cognizant of the laws that they have there, and have an HR person and recruiter who also knows how to navigate that. So, you know, what this means is that you can't ask people what their previous salaries were. And that's a pretty typical, you know, question for a lot of folks who have been out in the workforce for a while. So again, these are some of the habits we need to develop as a professional now. So we really can't ask any questions of our candidates and applicants that indicate really like anything, right? Like where they live, any association that might allow you to put them in a category to be discriminated against, a protected class. And so women are protected as a protected class. And as we looked at some of the salary differentials between women and men, one of the things that was decided was that by sharing your salary history, you would allude to the obvious fact that you were paid at sometimes 84 cents less to the dollar than most men are paid. And that would then lead them to offer you less and continue the cycle, right, of not paying people equitably. So it is another law that's put in place to protect the employee. And it's, you know, I've seen it go without a hitch in California for the most part. And I think it's one of those things that we'll see go through most states fairly quickly. Negotiating for people who are from underrepresented backgrounds is always tough. So you need to make sure that you are optimizing to get the best salary possible. And this is one of the ways you can do that.
Yeah, I have to admit, I was at first a little dubious about it, because as a recruiter, you know, you want as much information as possible. So totally. As soon as you don't have the salary of the candidate, then the employer becomes more ambiguous about what they want to offer. But I have to admit, I've gotten on board because, you know, there's been quite a few women that have gotten pretty substantial pay increases who've told me after the fact. And I've been so happy for them, because really they've been paid on their merit, on what the role was being advertised, and they were suitable for the role, and that's what they should have been paid. They shouldn't be considered as value for money. No, so I'm kind of on board now.
Yeah, the first tech startup that I worked at paid me a salary that I know now was completely ridiculous. But I was coming from Washington State, and the first time in California, and had no idea how to negotiate, how to talk through that process, or that there was a process. So I just accepted the first thing they offered. So, you know, that's no one's fault but my own. But, you know, again, like, as we try to take care of our candidates and applicants as they're coming in, trying to offer them as much protection from making those kind of mistakes that can set them back for decades, right? Like, these are small things. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining me.
sunny
Thank you
Thursday
for
afternoon.
Yes, I appreciate your time.
Best of luck in renewable energy. I hope we treat you well.
Thank you. They are.